Hi, my name is Patrick Beamer, and I'm a doctoral student in the Educational Psychology and Educational Technology program at Michigan State University. And I'm here today with Dr. Allan Wigfield. Dr. Wigfield is professor, distinguished scholar, teacher, and director of graduate studies in the Department of Human Development and Quantitative Methodology at the University of Maryland. So I want to first thank you for joining me today.
You're welcome. Glad to be with you.
Great. So we'll start with the first question here. So first, what led you to become interested in intervention work?
Well, I think the main thing was I had done research with Jackie Eccles for quite a few years on the development of children's motivation, and we published articles about how it changed over time, and particularly how children's competence, beliefs, and value of achievement, for many children at least, seem to decline. And after doing that work for quite a few years, I just got more and more interested in, well, can we do something about this, particularly for the kids that were potentially struggling the most in school. And by that time, I had moved to the University of Maryland. And so kind of a nice opportunity presented itself because Dr. John Guthrie was beginning a new center to study reading at that point, and he was quite interested in working on reading motivation and ways to improve it. So I brought the motivation expertise, he brought the reading expertise, and so together we began to develop some instructional programs to try to increase both children's motivation and comprehension in reading, first in elementary school and then in middle school. So that's the story in a nutshell of how it all kind of got started. So
Perfect. So I'll go into our second question here. So what would you say are the key elements of good intervention research?
Well, that's a simple question in the guise of a very complicated question. So let me say a couple of things about that. A lot of the research that John Guthrie and I did was pretty elaborate intervention research in the sense that our programs lasted for up to 12 weeks. They involved a couple hours a day with the students and a lot of teacher instructional time. So it was time and resource intensive to implement those interventions in school. Recent work, and Patrick, you just told me you just talked to Judy Harakevich, the more brief intervention work that's been kind of all the rage these days has different sorts of issues. So let me just start a little bit with the more complex interventions and then say a couple things about the simpler ones. One of the really critical things with the more complex interventions is being sure that the school district is very much on board with what you're planning to do, that you have leadership that supports you, you have teachers that are convinced that this is a good idea, and that you spend a lot of time making sure to bring them along with you, to involve them in the implementation, and to give them as much support as you can give. Because it's difficult for teachers to change their teaching. They get constant messages about how here's the next new thing we're going to do, and so let's jump on board. And after a while, they get, I think, a little tired and maybe a little bit cynical about that. So you have to be able to really collaborate with them, make them partners and not just implementers, and really convince them that this is going to be beneficial for their kids. I think that's kind of a really important set of principles for broader intervention work. Second, and this is something that cuts across both the broader intervention work and as well as the briefer intervention work that many of us are doing now, it's really critical that it be theory-based and really come out of a good set of knowledge and information about the nature of motivation and the important constructs that are involved in it. My student Emily Rosenzweig and I just published a review of STEM intervention research and educational psychologist. And Emily was really shocked to find how many intervention studies did not have clear theoretical guiding. And what she found in most of those studies were not very successful. Interventions that work the best come out of a strong theoretical framework or frameworks. They can borrow from more than one sometimes, but that really needs to be laid out. And the intervention researchers really need to connect what they're planning on doing to some of the principles of the theory in order to make sure that they have something that has a greater chance of succeeding. And I can give a specific example or two of that if you like, or if that's enough, we can stop this part.
Please, yeah.
So one of the things that we did with a Corey intervention, all right, let me step back. So John Guthrie, my intervention was called Concept-Oriented Reading Instruction, or CORI. And we had about 6 fundamental motivational principles that teachers try to implement in their classrooms through their instruction. And one was coming out of self-determination theory, providing the students with different choices of what they could do. And so that was the theoretical grounding. We had self-determination theory, the notion of autonomy, and so we thought that that would be a good thing to do based on the theory. But what we found really quickly was that we had to be really careful about how we structured the choices, had to give teachers a lot of guidance, had to do some constraining of the choices so that children were making choices that didn't actually end up harming their motivation, like a kid who was struggling with reading, choosing a really difficult book. So the theory guided us, but then once we took it into practice, we had to be sure that it worked in ways that were going to be effective and in line with the principle. For the briefer interventions, I think that that challenge is a little less of an issue, because if it's something like increasing, say, the utility value in the way that Judy has done, then if you're evaluating quotes or having students write about things, then I think that alignment is a little clearer. But in complex interventions in particular, sometimes translating a motivational principle from a theory isn't always as straightforward as one might think. And so you really have to work through that carefully in order to do it in a way that's beneficial for students.
Right. So that leads us into our last question here. So what advice would you give to students and faculty about conducting high quality intervention research?
Well, I would say approach them enthusiastically, but also cautiously, and think carefully about the amount of time it takes to do a good intervention, some of the risks that are involved in that. I think particularly for people just beginning their careers or late in their graduate school time, interventions, because I'm really thrilled with how well a lot of interventions are working, but every time you do one, there's a significant chance that maybe it's not going to work. And then where does that leave you? If you're trying to get tenure, if you're doing a dissertation, projects that don't work out very well can really kind of slow you down a little bit. So I don't want to say if you're passionate about interventions, you should wait until after you have tenure. But in some ways, I think that that's a good way to think about it. If you can put some things off a little bit, you have more time, and there's not so many risks involved. The other thing is, I would really say, again, the importance of developing collaborative and partnering kind of relationships with the schools that you would be working with, or possibly at the university level. I'm doing some new intervention work now with a biology professor here, and it's been really exciting to kind of work with him as he shapes up his ideas about what motivation is from his perspective, and then lines that up with the ed psych perspective. So having good collaborators that really have their feet on the ground with the instructional area that you're going to intervene in will really help you be sure to get something that should be more likely to work.
Great. Well, I want to thank you for joining me today.
Okay.
And we will talk to you next time.
Okay, sounds great.
Thank you.